NASCAR, hot rod, drag racing, drag strips, race car, vintage paperbacks. Hi, I'm Gary Lavisi, and this time we're going to take a look at cars that have to do with auto racing.
Books.
Books that have to do with auto racing. There's a group of the paperbacks. You can take a look at the spines. This is not all of them by any means. Actually, I did a large detailed article in Paperback Parade number 102 that lists a lot more of these cars in this genre. Books in this genre of cars. I got cars on the brain. But it's a cool subject because everybody loves cars. Everybody loves cars, racing cars, but also everybody loves books about racing cars. And if you don't have a race car or a drag racer or a NASCAR or a stock car or anything else like that, you do like to read books about driving race cars and racing and drag racing and all of that. And so without further ado, we're going to take a look at some of them now. One of when you talk about hot rods and drag racing and cars that have to do with racing cars, one of the authors that comes to mind, the major author, is Henry Gregor Felsen. Henry Gregor Felsen wrote Hot Rod. He wrote Road Rocket. He wrote 6 books that have to do with various racing cars, people who race cars. He wrote Hot Rod, Fever Heat, Street Rod, Ragtop, Road Rocket, and Crash Club. The first Bantam printing of Hot Rod is on the cover of Paperback Parade 102, and that's a 1940s paperback. I don't have all of these books handy now after a few years after I wrote the article, but some of them are still around. Hot Rod and Road Rocket are two of the best. Hot Rod was the first. This is a reprint, Bantam Books, 19th printing, and this is also Bantam Books. This is a 12th printing. These are probably from the late 60s. Fever Heat is another book by Felsen. This is a Dell First Edition, number 13, from the 1950s. He wrote this under the pseudonym of Angus Vicker. So this is his one book under pseudonym. The interesting thing about this book is it tells you, of course, about the a little bit of story on the back, but it also has a early NASCAR driver who talks about how the book was written. Felsen wrote 6 books. 5 of them deal with teenagers and fast cars and hot rods. One of them, this one, deals with actual a true story of an adult novel about race car drivers. And in this it says, "My name is Al DiCarlo. I race a stock car mostly around Iowa. Vicker took a lot of notes between races in the pits at Des Moines, and some of my blood is in these pages. Fever Heat is the real thing." And this is a story of Ace Jones, who grows up to be a tough guy in souped-up heaps that are his whole life. And these guys, they like to race fast cars. They like to break the rules, go over the line, and the artwork on the books is always showing like adventure and action. Also, sexy women are drawn to this fast lifestyle of cool guys with cool cars. I don't know if the back cover does not say who the cover artist is, but we're going to go through a bunch of them now, a bunch of the books now. Another author who wrote a lot of a bunch of hot rod books is Robert Sidney Bowen, and you may know him from the pulps because he wrote the Dusty Air's pulp magazine adventures, Air War novels, and he also wrote in the hot rod genre. He wrote Hot Rod Rodeo, This is a Scholastic book, number 827, and it's from 1969. It's the third printing. Baldwin also wrote Hot Rod Inferno, which is a Priory book. Priory books were published in Israel. Originally it was a Lancer book. Hot Rod Inferno. High Gear is a collection edited by Evan Jones. It's Bantam 1313. And this is from, it's the first Bantam edition from 1955. It collects stories about fast cars and the drivers. There's stories in here by Felsen, also Galt, Steinbeck, John D. McDonald, and many other writers. That's High Gear. And the back cover. These are true stories. The thing with this genre is you have fiction and you have nonfiction. The fiction stories, sometimes they're about kids in high school or college age, guys in their 20s, young guys who are looking to get the next thrill with a fast car, souping up an engine, and there's always like the thrill of the big race. A lot of times in these novels, there's maybe a guy who is best friend, or maybe his best enemy is also a driver, and there a lot of competition between them that culminates in a big race. And sometimes there's the girl that the both of them are trying to impress and they're in love with, and they're fighting for her attention and fighting for her. So there's that kind of thing in some of the books. There's always like a big race. There's always like a lot of competition, action, and adventure. And of course, the nonfiction books, have stories about true race car drivers, drivers who started NASCAR, drivers who raced Formula One cars, and true hot rod drivers and drag strip drivers. Drag Doll is the exciting story of Jet Johnson and his souped-up car. This is a Nova book, published in 1963. This is the third printing from 1966. R.W. Campbell might be Galt, might be William Campbell Galt. I'm not sure. It fits in with his kind of genre. The Day of the Drag Race by Philip Harkins is a Berkeley Highland book, C1034. That's from 1965. Oscar Mackenzie was a daredevil daydreamer. Surrounded by such formidable enemies in a household of bossy and nosy females, a family car with an automatic transmission, and his own lack of organization, Oscar Mackenzie makes a desperate bid to escape to fame and glory by secretly entering a drag race. But would he be revved up that morning with such eagerness if he could have seen ahead to the alert motorcycle policemen whose brave bulls and their moment of truth in Squaresville? There's a bunch of kind of pre-hippie, beatnik aspect to these drag race and racing car books, especially with the high school and college kids. Also, there's a juvenile delinquent aspect to it. So there's these genres kind of meld a little bit together. The Last Race by John Manship White, a novel about auto racing as high-speed, high-powered, and death-defying as the world's most dangerous sport. This has a cover by John Scott. It's a pocketbook, number 1016, from 1954. Great cover. Great cover. Looks like a NASCAR pile-up. It's amazing. these guys really had guts in racing these cars in those days and even today. And the back cover of these, just to show, always about something about the book. Here they're advertising more books in this the Berkeley Highland books, which were specifically for teenagers, kind of like an early version of Scholastic books. Daredevils of the Speedway by Ross Olney is a tempo book, T177, and this is from 1966. This edition is 1970. This is a true story about the Indianapolis 500 and the cars and the guys that race there. It's loaded, and I mean loaded with facts, pictures, explosions. Talks about the different drivers. It's all throughout the history of different races. Very cool book. Very cool book. Another one that's also nonfiction is NASCAR 25 Years of Racing Thrills by Marshall Stiegel. This is actually a Scholastic book. It's from 1974. It's interesting too because it's a sideways cover. So this is a cover, and the back cover gives you some photos of some of the famous drivers that are in this book. Junior Johnson, who was one of the founders of NASCAR. Richard Petty.
Yarborough.
Cale Yarborough. And the thing is that the book is all facts about, racing and NASCAR, how it started, the early. Is a really cool book. Great read, great information. It's all facts and the true story how the race got started, the history behind it, the great classic racing guys that raced these cars. I mean, these guys were daredevils. They were brave. They were incredible, and a lot of them were damn good mechanics. They knew cars inside out, and they knew driving inside out. So this is just a really cool book. Definitely one to find. The Kings of the Road by Ken Purdy is a Bantam F1203. Basically, it's about all the different cars that were used to race throughout the years, including like Mercers, Bearcats, MGs, Rolls, everything that was used in through the history of car racing. This is different from the old days, from early on until the 60s when this book was published. Another fiction for younger readers, The Roaring Road by Gene Olson, is originally from 1967. This is the fourth printing from 1973. I don't know who did the cover art, but it's really nice. There's a lot of books in these series. This is a Del Laurel Leaf, also for younger readers. Another story about, this is a story about a kid that, millionaire Hardin Greathouse has a pet dream to race his new Crusader at Sebring, America's most thrilling sports car race against racing car royalty Ferraris, Porsches, Maseratis. Dave Falconer is drawn into the plan as part of a father and son team of mechanics to get the new car in top shape. being on the crew is not enough. Dave is determined to learn race driving, and especially to get behind the wheel at Sebring. And auto racing is explored in detail with Dave Falconer behind the wheel. Technical content is authentic, says Kirkus Review. And a lot of these books were written by people that were into car racing, into stock cars and drag racing, when they knew, they were also mechanics. They knew how cars ran and how to fix cars in those days. Stock Car Racer by Carrie Jackson. This is Signet KD 503 from 1965. Originally, it was from 1957 hardcover. And the young hot rodders, they lived for speed and brushed up against death. Again, young guys with fast cars. Dragging and Driving by Tom McPherson is a scholastic book. Second printing is from 1965, originally from 1960. And this one's interesting. It's a book for juveniles, I guess junior high school age kids, guys mostly, and Dragging and Driving. On the back it has a little bit of a glossary. Do you know these special words used by the dragging and driving experts? Dash pot, Johnson rod, squirrel, velocity stacks. And there's more inside about a whole an index and glossary about some of the terms used. The Racer by Hans Roche is Ballantine book number 17, an early Ballantines from 1953, and it has a wraparound cover. I'm not sure who the artist is. Very nice. Very nice. It's the cover and the back cover. And I'm just going to read a little bit about the back cover. This is that rare book, a novel about sports, which will be enjoyed by everyone, sports fan or not. For in addition to its exciting and colorful setting of auto racing and up and down the continent, this book tells a mature, sophisticated story peopled with three-dimensional characters. You will remember Eric Lester, the bitter champion, as vividly as the heady danger of his steel-nerved driving. A lot of these books, some of them have a formula to them, but the formula is something that's classic and is something that is almost epic and in its story. William Campbell Galt was a hard-boiled crime fiction writer, creator of Joe Puma and Brock the Rock Callahan, and wrote a lot of crime and a lot of pulp adventures. But he also wrote in the young adult or in the genre for boys, college boys, and juvenile writing. And he wrote a bunch of books. Speedway Challenge, Berkeley Books. This is the 7th printing from 1965. Speedway Challenge. He wrote Thunder Road, which is a scholastic book. I guess all kids love speed, but with you it's almost a religion, isn't it? Not quite, Pete said, but I love it. I sure love it. If you are going to race, his dad told him, use the tracks, not the highways. From veteran racer Barney Spicer, young Pete Elliott gets good counsel in a racing car. On the dirt tracks, he first tangles with Rocky Revere. At last, they fight it out for speed supremacy in the big one, the Brickyard, the Indianapolis Speedway, Thunder Road. William Campbell Galt. A lot of these have to do with also illegal racing, street racing, and drag racing on the street rather than at a track. And Another book by Galt. This is from 1968. Second printing is Dirt Track Summer, Scholastic Book T 1015. And this is a dirt track duel at 150 miles an hour. Whitey came charging down the bank turn, his tires screaming, heading straight for Jose. Maybe he hoped to frighten Jose into going for the brakes, but Jose held his ground and floored his right foot. The crash must have been heard all over the county. Jose, fighting for control, went down, sliding up the bank and into one of the support posts. Whitey wasn't so lucky. The black car went through the fence, end over end, and the ambulance began to wail. Dirt Track Summer.
Nice, now I don't have to read it.
Well, let's just try to give you an idea about the story.
Not that I was...
Some of these are pretty good. They're pretty good to read. Drag Strip, William Campbell Galt. Looks like a Bob Abbott cover. This is a 7th printing from 1969. William Campbell Galt. The Red Roadster by Gene Olson is a Scholastic book. This is a 3rd printing from 1966. The Red Roadster is a red Alfa Romeo Giulietta Sprint Spider, the slickest, speediest, sportiest car that has ever been seen at Linda Vista High School. And turns out that one of the teachers actually has the car, and one of the guys is interested in using it for racing. Speed Crazy is a book called Hot Rod Reporter by Alan L. Johnson, a Nova book.
Whoa.
From the 1960s.
My hand is like falling asleep.
Okay, we'll go quick. And Hot Rod Reporter is just a story about kids that are into speed and the crazy world of racing cars. The Roaring Road is a 1957 book about the best auto racing stories of the decade, of the 50s. Wild Wheels, edited by Don McKay, is this is a 2nd printing from 1969, and it's stories about racing, and it has a Don Purdy introduction. He's one of the great racing car drivers, great NASCAR drivers. When Engines Roar is edited by William F. Nolan and Charles Beaumont. 19 stories. These are true stories. This is a Bantam book from 1964. Nolan was a race car driver, and he also knew Steve McQueen, who was also a race car driver. Steve McQueen is a guy who, the way he says it is, I'm not sure whether I'm an actor who races or a racer who acts. And Steve McQueen's Star on Wheels is a Berkeley book from 1972, written by William F. Nolan. It shows here he's on the motorcycle, but we'll kind of let this one pass because Steve McQueen was known for as a race car driver, and him and William F. Nolan actually participated in quite a few races in California and in the West Coast. So
is William Nolan a science fiction?
William F. Nolan, science fiction writer, the author of Logan's Run, and the movie that was made into a famous movie, and many other things, horror writer. Yeah, William F. Nolan, the same guy. And he edited this book with Charles Beaumont, who was a famous cult science fiction horror writer. Beaumont and Nolan wrote some stories for Twilight Zone, and many other TV shows, magazines, and stuff, and did the incredible stuff. The Steve McQueen book is really cool. It's just tells you about his life and his love with racing, motorcycles, and of course cars. The Streak by Paul Darcy Bowles has a Harry Share cover. It's an unforgettable novel of speed and passion into the thundering metal where a black-eyed girl wanted him all or nothing. It's it's a novel about race car driving, about the driver and the girl that he loves, and their story. And part of the story is speed. Part of the story is that it's really dangerous. I mean, these guys that were racing and getting in these cars, they never knew if they were going to get to be alive at the end of the race. And a lot of them didn't. In real life, a lot of them didn't. And in the books, there's a lot of this that goes on, and it does mirror what's really true. Another series is the Black Tiger series by Patrick O'Connor. Patrick O'Connor was a well-known author. He used Patrick O'Connor as a pseudonym. He wrote The Mouse That Roared and other books, but he's known for the Black Tiger series. Black Tiger was a car, and I have a few of them of the books in that series. Black Tiger at Le Mans, and this is a Berkeley Diamond, Berkeley Highland book, second printing from 1972. Originally it was a hardcover in 1958. That's the Black Tiger. I don't know who did the cover art. Cover art on these books is just great. I mean, just showing, the fast, cool, sleek, modern, beautiful cars, all different types that were at races, and the racing and the crashes, the wild turns, and all the action and adventure of racing. And the Black Tiger is another one. It's a Berkeley Highland book, F1297. This is a third printing from 1968. Man Killer or Man Maker. The Black Tiger was a kind of a car that tested every man or every young man's mettle, and it would, if you drove it, it could make you a hero and a winner, or it could kill you. Black Tiger at Indianapolis is a Scholastic book. Third printing is from 1969. Originally it was a hardcover from 1962, and this is the Indy 500. Cars traveling 180 miles an hour. Only their wheels only inches from each other. In seconds, a blowout, a burst oil line, even a slight gust of wind can explode into a 5-car crash. And this is the story of Woody Hartford, famous for his road racing success, faces sneering challenge of an Indy driver and takes on the toughest racing test of his career, the grueling 500-mile Indianapolis Speedway Classic. That's Black Tiger at Indianapolis. And these books are all really, the Black Tiger books are really very well done, very authentic. And Black Tiger at Indianapolis, I have another edition. It's also Scholastic books from 1969. Black Tiger at Indianapolis. And let me just show the back covers of some of these. Indy 500. Black Tiger at Indianapolis. This edition is kind of interesting. It's interesting that with the Ford versus Ferrari movie that came out, if anybody's seen that movie, where story of Carroll Shelby and Ken Miles, his driver, who raced at Le Mans in the 60s. They brought the Shelby GT by Ford to race against and beat Ferrari. It's interesting that also that a lot of times people who have books, like to write their name in books, and that's something that we've all seen. People stamp a lot of times on the edge of the book, like here, their name, or sometimes inside the book. I don't know if this is um, really Shelby, but I'd like to think it maybe was his once, because this book is stamped Shelby, and inside it's stamped Shelby. So I don't know. Did this book, of course I drop it. It's so delicate, I'm trying to hold it carefully. But did this book belong to Shelby? Carol Shelby? I don't know.
Well,
Don't
belong
know
to
at all.
A Shelby, for sure. They wanted that perfectly clear.
Yeah, don't know. But it's I'd like to think that it was. I'd like to think that it was. You know, a lot of the people, almost all of them, that are the real race car drivers that are mentioned in these books, in the nonfiction books, and even some of the fiction books are based on actual drivers that started NASCAR, that raced at Le Mans and other places, Indianapolis and various tracks all over the country, Watkins Glen, every place. A lot of those, all those guys, they're not with us anymore, but they were really the real heroes. They were tough, they were strong, they were fearless, and they gave their all when they were driving their cars, when they were racing, and it was exciting. It was an exciting time in this country's history, and they shouldn't be forgotten. And these books, I just like these books. I'm not a race car guy. At the time when people were driving muscle cars in the early 70s. I knew a lot of people who had GTOs. The Judge was a modified GTO. They had other muscle cars like Roadrunner, Challengers. There's a guy that I knew who had a SS396 Chevy Nova, which was really fast and all of that kind of stuff. But I didn't. I had a little Volkswagen Bug because that's all I could afford. But that was okay. But I did, love the cars that these older guys had because I was a younger guy, a teenager. And they were in their 20s. They were working. They could afford cars. And we went to like National Speedway a couple of times, things like that. And it was so cool. And the cars were so cool. And some of the guys that drove them were idiots, and some of the guys were really cool. But it was always, the thing is that I always respected the fact that, they had guts, man. They had real guts. And racing all those cars, driving those cars at the speeds that they were doing. And just these books kind of bring a little bit of that to the memory of what it might have been like to be in that position, because that was probably a great position to be in for guys in those days, and to have that kind of life. So just wanted to share that with you. Hope you enjoy this look at NASCAR, drag racing, street racing, hot rod vintage paperbacks. They're cool to collect. Cover art is really great, and the stories are really good. They're fun to read. They're not extremely deep, a lot of them, but the fiction stories are fun to read. The nonfiction books are ultimately cool because they're talking about real drivers who began NASCAR, who began racing, and their stories are unbelievable, and they're true. So that's those nonfiction books that I pointed out here, and of course there's many more. Once again, just this issue of Paperback Parade number 102 has a very detailed article by me about about many of the books that I mentioned, and many others that I didn't mention today. Also, a little biograph on Henry Gregor Felsen, who died in 1995, but was maybe the grandfather of the writers of vintage paperbacks about hot rods and drag racing and stuff like that. And so just again, just want to thank you for looking. Hope you enjoyed this look, and give us a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe. Thanks a lot. See you next time.